Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Louis Allen of Adirondack Studios as we continue our exploration of space and spaces.
Hi, everybody. So this morning we talked about how designers are working in bringing the past to life. We looked at how designers are dealing with contemporary icons and taking them from the screen into a three-dimensional experience. Now we're going to go into the future, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. John Spencer, who for 30 years has been pioneering in the field of outer space. He's the founder of the Space Tourism Agency, has been involved in 3 man-rated projects that have gone into outer space, consults with NASA, is currently designing a mixed development entertainment complex called Mars World, which you'll find more about. He's designed a beautiful space yacht, which I showed earlier today. And it's my pleasure to have him here. And his mantra is, it's not space. No, I'm going to redo that. It's not, sorry, John. It's not science fiction, it's space future. So please welcome John Spencer.
Thank you, Louis. That was close. It's not science fiction, it's science future. But close, you get the point, right? Right. Well, first off, I want to thank the Themed Entertainment Association and the group who put together this conference. It's just actually been wonderful. And what I want to do is share with you some interesting ideas, some future-oriented ideas, but I want to preface that by saying everything I show you, and I'll put a little background behind that later on, can become real in the future. And right now, it's a very interesting time with all the space activities going on, because it turns out that for really the rest of our lives, our children's lives, and their lives, there's a grand story evolving. And that grand story is humanity moving out into the solar system. And we can all be part of that story by participating in the kinds of projects I'll show you, and in museum projects and in education programs and so on and so forth. But as storytellers, this is a fantastic and important grand story. All right, so you saw a 3D image of this, but this is a real proposal for an orbital superyacht. And I created this and designed it because of my background being an outer space architect, which sounds really great at parties when I say that and everything. But what I wanted to do was create a beautiful spaceship design, and I have the architectural drawings for this, and we've done a lot of work on this. But I want to be able to finance it through some of the wealthiest companies in the world and wealthiest individuals. And since this is modeled after an ocean-going superyacht, I'll probably be able to do that. It's probably about $5 billion. Because ocean-going superyachts exist for pride and prestige and social standing. And you can imagine being the first person or company in the world to have an orbital superyacht. Now again, to back this up, take a second please and read the names of these multi-billionaires. Now this is important because most of these came on board within the last decade. But these are some of the wealthiest, most influential people in the world. Some of them invented whole industries. And they've invested in or even started space enterprise, space tourism companies. And they have limitless sustainability. If they want to do something and they need an extra billion or two here or there, they have it and they can get it. So when I show this to business people, investment bankers, finance people, it really impresses them that this group of super smart, accomplished people all have one thing in common, an interest in participating in the space industry, private space enterprise. And these are people actually flown to space as private space tourists. They paid tens of millions of dollars, risked their lives, trained in Russia, flew up on a Russian rocket in a Russian capsule, spent 10 to 12 days on the International Space Station, had a great time, and returned on a return capsule. So they fulfilled a dream of space experience. There's more lined up to do it, it's just we don't have room on the space station, so we don't have the capacity. Because we finished the space station, it's only 2 lifeboats to return people, you can't have more than 6 people on board. And that's why within the next 5 years, we'll most likely have the world's first real space hotel orbiting in Earth orbit. This is my friend Buzz. I've done a lot of work with him. And a lot of the retired astronauts and new astronauts are now very involved in space enterprise because they've been there. They know how to live and work in space, so their experience is invaluable. And Buzz is really a crack up. He's real fun. All right. Okay. There we go. So these are some of the projects I've worked on. And by working on, I mean I'm not an engineer, but as an architect designer, I focus on the interior design, crew habitation issues. Sleeping is a big deal in space. How do we create a better quality space experience, space environment, so it's safer and the people can get their science and their work done better? And the down line for the tourists to have a much better experience. How do you cook a fine meal in zero gravity? How do you serve it? What's hygiene in space? Music, fashion. All of those issues you don't think about typically in the hardcore science and space, you have to think about now. Space resorts, space cruise ships. But again, last 30 years in parallel to real space, I've been working on space entertainment projects. Designed a lot of projects, built some. And most of the time I invent the project. I like clients, but I like being the owner, finance guy, and team, because then you have an equity position in the whole thing. We'll get into this a little bit later down the line. So there's a couple of pictures of Mars World. We'll talk about that a little later. But Jim Cameron, we worked with Jim for a couple of years, Buzz and I, on a Mars movie he wanted to do. He hasn't produced it yet. But we spent a lot of time designing the Mars vehicle that would take the astronauts from Earth to Mars and the Mars habitats and all kinds of stuff. And then he repurposed this, which I didn't know about. It was great when my wife and I went to see Avatar. There's our spaceship. That was really one of those fun experiences. You know, he owned it, we all volunteered. But you never know, particularly in the entertainment industry, you guys are in entertainment, where things are gonna go. But that was really fun to see that on the screen. Okay. This is gonna be one of the highlighted experiences at Mars World. So what does this all mean? What it means, in my opinion, is by doing real space design and having real space entertainment design, the real space design allows us to be more authentic in our entertainment projects. Yet it turns out the entertainment projects kind of pay the bills. So they go parallel with each other very nicely. And this dates back to Walt Disney advising President Kennedy to go ahead and do the moon speech. There's a whole wonderful story there showing the visionary Walt Disney advising the president to do a visionary statement. So entertainment and real space has had a partnership for many decades. And I've been a bridge in that partnership. And what I want to do, and like today, for example, I want to turn that bridge into a bit of a super highway. I want all of you to get more involved in, or to get involved in space stuff, and more of our real space guys to learn more about storytelling. They know zippo about storytelling. You say storytelling, they go like, what? Say what? And here's a good point, because if you think about it, we're all futurists in this room, because we work on projects that are 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line. And if you take that an extra step and say 20, 25 years, I mean, who really knows what's going to happen 20 years from now, or 25 or more? But to add the future as part of the space theme, that space future really expands the characters, the stories, the places that we can work with. So that's the future part, which most people never think about, space people think about, is a very vital part for that storytelling context. And of course, with these projects, you basically get to have, backstory, future history, space cultures, and that brings these projects, these location-based entertainment projects, to life. And they also produce a large intellectual property library. Now, our investors, investment bankers like it. In fact, as it says, they like it a lot. Because the people know that it's the intellectual property that you're creating which builds the value for your venture. So, in my opinion, what we've seen is this growing evolution, from theme park, or amusement parks to theme parks to immersive worlds, and now we're talking about immersive realities. But what's really interesting with these immersive realities that I want to explore with you is that some of them can become real someday, and that's unique. So, a simulated Mars resort, a simulated moon base, a simulated this as a resort in space. Someday, they can become real. And what we do on Earth as an entertainment simulation promotes the real stuff, and the real stuff can basically happen. Here's some examples, orbital cruise ships, the space yachts, lunar racing. There's a multitude of themes that we can get into that we can expose the public to, which they've never thought about, but we can realistically, within the context of building on Earth, actually make these places, these immersive worlds, these immersive experiences. Location. Let's go over this a little bit. There's a lot of locations in space, just in our solar system. You've got Earth orbit, you've got the moon, you've got going to and from the moon, you've got orbiting the moon. And a little highlight here, I just heard the other day that the second ticket has now been sold for $150 million. There's 2 tickets sold recently for $150 million each for 2 tourists and 1 Russian cosmonaut to take a Russian vehicle and do a flyby of the moon. So they basically experienced Earthrise. This is all real. So that's going to happen probably within 3 years. So you imagine spending $150 million for a joyride? But there's an amazing amount of people in this world who can do that and want to. They think they have a third one, so they'll have to do 2 missions. So themes, it's limitless. But if you look at it, you've got exploration, you've got romance, yachting, space comedy. It's a Space Guard service. I'm actually right now working with the U.S. Air Force on developing the foundation for a real Space Guard service modeled after the United States Coast Guard. If you think about more and more people going, more diversity of people, more things happening in space, like the oceans, we're going to need space lanes, we're going to need a Coast Guard type of thing, regulatory issues. There's a whole variety of infrastructure things going on in space that's exciting. In fact, one of the fastest growing areas in space enterprise, believe it or not, is space lawyers. And it's good, because all of our space regulations and treaties are based on maritime law, but they need to be tweaked more and more for the particulars of space. For example, can you own an asteroid? Can you own dirt from the part of the moon? Well, currently you cannot own the asteroid, you cannot own a part of the moon, but just like the gold rush in California, if you had a claim, you could mine somewhere and take the ore with you and sell it, commercialize it. So the regulations Congress passed allows you to own lunar soil or ice, which is a big deal, or ice from an asteroid or minerals, and commercialize it. So that's what most people are not familiar with. There's this whole infrastructure happening which will enable space commerce, space tourism, space sports to evolve. So the science future design process that I've developed many years ago and we're refining always starts off by designing the real spaceship or the space facility first, as best as we can with real space architecture, space science, and then adapting that, using it as a model for the Earth-based project. And it's funny, we talk about, well, this one's an Earth-based project. In our culture, that's fine, you don't hear that too much. Oh yeah, we're doing an Earth-based project. But that combination, as I said, of real space and space entertainment is working very well for us. So these are key considerations. There's many, many more, but the future part of it, the backstory, the science, when you mix those all together, you can come up with some extraordinary design ideas, design projects, and visitor experiences. Overnight, that's my favorite. I strongly believe that when people wake up in a themed environment, an immersive environment, whatever the theme is, that's a more deep, a more meaningful experience for them. They'll spend more time, more money. So as this says, it's also a more meaningful experience for the owner and the operator. That was funny. It really was funny. I think it's funny. I'm going to vamp on this a little, but we really do love working with investment bankers because all of the stuff I'm telling you is interesting, good ideas, pretty pictures, but means nothing unless you can finance the projects and unless they can be profitable and build value. And I want to encourage all of you to step up a little in terms of also developing your own IP, developing your own projects. You're all smart enough to basically put all these together and work with investment bankers and work with the attorneys that put the IP deals together. I've been in numerous investment banking meetings where it says creative, and we're brainstorming, and we've got the whiteboards, no joke, as when I'm designing something or working with a creative team, because you're creating something, you're putting a deal together, you're designing the deal. And more, the investment banking finance people hear more about space stuff. They hear about Elon Musk, they hear about all these people investing in all this, and they're paying attention, and they find it interesting as well. Some of our guys love the idea they're helping us finance our projects because they get to take their children to one of our things, or their grandchildren. And once the finance guys who are very rich have been there, done that, they want to do fun projects. Why not? You can do a shopping center, or you can do Mars World. Shopping center, Mars World. You know, as long as the numbers work and there's a solid team who's experienced and done it before, which is key, you can just about get anything financed. And right now, there's more money out there to be invested in new projects than in human history. In the United States alone, it's about $6 trillion. That's the T word, trillion. Looking for investment opportunities and good projects and good teams. And that's because that money's come out of being warehoused because of the recession. It's becoming more risk tolerant, and they want to work that money, and they want to work it on fun projects. Fun is a bigger deal in investment banking than you might imagine. So that was my vamp on that. A few things on Mars World. And I'm hoping we can all work together on this if we succeed in financing. It's about a $2 billion project. The first one's planned for Las Vegas. This is my architectural design master plan for a site a little south of McCarran Airport. And the whole concept is you get to visit the city of the future on Mars. And the reason we chose city and making it a couple $1 billion projects was the city has a huge variety of things to do, from restaurants to shopping, entertainment, all these kind of things. And the $2 billion means we're working in a different kind of level of finance, where the money's there. It's your job to convince the people who have the money, who control the money, and the investment bankers and their brokers to invest that money in your project. So we've got a great story for this. It's designed for about 7 million annual visitors. It's a totally indoor park, which has been a big advantage for us because we're also negotiating, almost done with the deal, to build one in China. So indoor park allows you to have much more control over the quality of the visitor experience and, of course, the consistency of the visitor experience. And weather is not a problem. So indoor parks I'm seeing as becoming more dense indoor parks and more of them because you have better control over it and weather's not an issue. The other picture, this is a picture of the concept of Mars World. We build it inside the rim of an impact crater, so it's a round circulation system. The dirt protects people from radiation, and the round dome actually sits on top of the round circulation. We've developed a pretty extreme and pretty interesting, Okay. And transition, and most of you guys know this, but transition experience from your normal world into the invented world, the immersive world, is critical to help prepare the visitors to start having that experience. So we've developed 3 methods in transitions from Earth to Mars and from current time to future time. And I believe it's important to put a lot of time and money and energy into transitions into your experience and then out of your experience. So like I say, it's a pretty big project, but we're going to create an opportunity for those visitors who want to pay extra to be able to learn a little bit about, put on a Mars spacesuit, and go and walk out with their family and friends on the surface of Mars, both daytime and nighttime. The great thing with the interiors for Mars World is we totally control this lighting, And we'll be able to have the daytime and transition into nighttime. And here's something cool. The Martian sky is far more interesting than Earth's sky. The reason for that, Mars is further away from the sun, less sunlight, and only has a 1% atmosphere at surface level. So you see a zillion more stars. The Milky Way is the Milky Way. If you're in alignment, you can see the gas giants. So the sky is far more interesting. We're going to be able to project that. Almost done. All right. So let's geek out just a little bit. I've chosen the perfect spot on Mars for our Mars city. And believe it or not, there is an ideal location. It's 14 degrees above the equator, so your use of fuel going back and forth is lower. And it's at the base of the largest volcano in the solar system. There's 3 sister volcanoes next to it, and it's real close to the deepest trench in the solar system. So this is the tourist spot on Mars, and you all know location, location, location. Okay. You're gonna love this next one. Okay. I admit it, I have a thing for bulldozers in space. All right. Another funny one. You got to catch up on the space humor, okay? Let's. All right. Again, this is a science geek thing, but could you imagine the cost and the difficulty of lifting a bulldozer into Earth orbit, taking it to the moon, or schlepping it all the way to Mars, soft landing it? Forget it. Let's, with this science future approach, think about what we can do in the future. So I developed this whole new kind of Martian construction technique, which is what we call ANTS. And yes, I named it this way so we could use the acronym NANTS. ANTS. Thousands of these little bugs that are specially designed and special tools that let them tunnel, carry dirt, move stuff, do a whole variety of things, all controlled by an AI. You hear AI a lot now. And they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't get paid, none of this stuff. But it's really rethinking how we do things gives you advantages, and it's actually a lot of fun. And now, more fun. But again, bulldozers face. Here's a fun project I developed a number of years ago, and I plan to make this happen within the next 20 years. I usually work on a 20-year cycle. And there's trillions of dollars, actually, again, the T word, in the sports and media industries looking for new, exciting things. So let's plan out the idea of manned rover racing on the moon. $1 billion prize, it's $50 million a year for 20 years, free trip back to Earth. I have talked to movie producer friends, sports guys. They say, "When can we do this? When can we do this?" I say, "Well, we're gonna do it. You got first crack at it." But imagining these kind of outrageous projects, but having the science and the financing behind it, that's the trick, is very exciting. And let's spend a few minutes back on Destiny, the orbital superyacht. So what I want to do is engage the wealthiest companies and wealthiest people in the world to start thinking about and investing in space ventures. Now, the wealthiest people all have superyachts, and they have the jets, and they have the mansions, and what they basically do is one-upsmanship in their private lives. I can tell you all kinds of great stories. And also another story is that these kinds of ideas take you to special places to meet amazing people, but it's the idea that opens the doors to do that. So I want to design and build an orbital superyacht. And it's about, I said, $5 billion, and I plan to finance it by convincing the people to do it. This is about 300 foot long for 10 passengers, 6 human crew members, over 100 robots that actually do all kinds of stuff. It would be assembled in space by inflatable structures all linked together, and then the atmosphere put into it, and operated both on board, but also telepresence. That means people on Earth, operating all kinds of things. And my personal plan I'll share with you to go to space, is that if I succeed in convincing people to finance that we build and assemble Destiny, I have to go. I get paid to go for a job inspection. Isn't that a great scheme? All right, let's keep it between us. Okay. You saw the 3D image. This is actually kind of famous now in the space world because it's different. But it makes sense, and it's intriguing, and people want to know more. And that's what a good concept brings forward. These are some of the activities, and I'm almost done. One of the interesting things about super yachts is the hot tub. Everybody has these big hot tubs, there are little swimming pools, there's all kinds of reasons why, particularly in Europe, and I won't get into the details. But when you translate an Earth-based thing to space, you gotta have your hot tub in space. You gotta have your hot tub on your orbital super. Turns out all fluids in zero gravity form a sphere because gravity's not there to flatten it out. So I actually had a great time figuring out how to design an orbital hot tub. And that's what I call it, the hot sphere. That was really fun. You know, that black thing in the center has all the gyros to keep it where you want it. It heats and bubbles and all that stuff, and the crew brings that out, puts water around it, and the water will stay put unless you hit it, and it kind of bounces out, but then it'll come back. Then your robots bring you the drinks, you know, and you just have a great time. But it's fun designing for a new environment, and so the only place that I know of you can do that is for space and zero gravity. So what's a dining table in space? It's not a table, right? What's a hot tub? What's all these different things? So it's an extraordinary design adventure to work on these projects. So envisioning the future. We've had grandmasters do this, you know, Jules Verne. Now here's something that's astounding. When Jules Verne wrote his book From the Earth to the Moon, and it came out in 1865, the end of the American Civil War, he forecast that it would be the Americans and launching, believe it or not, for real, from Florida, because our southern state, to go to the moon. Because Florida means you're closer to the equator and there's more efficiency in doing so. But his science friends advised him to do that. Walt Disney, as I mentioned, convinced President Kennedy to do the moon speech. And for most of Disney's life, he was really a futurist. I mean, you guys, a lot of you work for Disney. He's my big hero. So his promotion of space and adding his credibility and legitimacy helped NASA in its formation and pushed the promotion of the space program. So again, entertainment and real space working together. I love this. 1968, a year before the Apollo landing, Stanley Kubrick and their crew in England, it was all done in England, put together the movie Space 2001: A Space Odyssey. And look at this, one of the posters. Look what the production designers did. Isn't that amazing? Well, I'm working on the moon, I should have some device that has all my daily information in it. 40 years later, you get the tablets and stuff. So science fiction is oftentimes a predictor of things that will happen. And finally, and I truly believe this, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So we can all work together to invent a bright, peaceful future using space as one of the inspiring parts of that future. And believe me, millennials and young people find this very interesting, so we can capitalize on it. So anyway, so thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to share this. So you guys must have wonderful questions to ask, right?
Hello. Oh, there we go. Hi.
Hi.
I have a two-parter question. So I actually just went to a NASA Rascal conference just a few months back, and they were playing with the idea of a space resort, like a space hotel. So I'm wondering what kind of collaboration you've already established between the entertainment industry and the real aerospace industry.
Where did you go to? What was the conference?
NASA Rascal 2017.
Oh, I don't know about that. But to answer your question, the first part is there's a fantastic group you guys can all tap into. It's called the Science and Entertainment Exchange. And it's part of the National Academy of Sciences. I'm their senior space scientist, futurist guy. And we consult with and advise movie producers, TV producers, production designers, screenwriters on the sciences when they ask questions about that, across the whole board, anthropology, linguistics, whatever sciences. Space, NASA space guys like space entertainment. You look at the Kennedy Space Center. We have a fellow here who's designing a hotel for the Kennedy Space Center. all kinds of stuff going on. So there's a lot of connections. There's also a want of connections, but there's a bridging, as I mentioned earlier, between the NASA space enterprise groups and the entertainment groups that we simply need to work a little harder on. And if we do that, that collaborative approach will accelerate everything, and our entertainment will be better and more authentic.
And then part two, with the aerospace industry being kind of their priorities being aerospace, what do you think your timeline is to making some of your projects a reality?
Well, it's a good question because the traditional aerospace industry is mostly aviation, space military, which there's a lot more of than you might think, and it's very high quality. I mean, it's very important. But then there's the private space enterprise. And that's where our billionaires are involved in forming all these companies. In the last 4 years, over 200 private space enterprise space companies have been formed, and most of them receive financing, whether it's 3D printing for space or new rocket engines for space. You've all heard, I'm sure, SpaceX and Jeff Bezos's, Blue Origin. So there's kind of a paralleling now of the traditional aerospace, and they're kind of a little bit mad at private space enterprise, going to get all the sex appeal and the money and all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of going along. And that's similar many years ago in the aviation industry, where it was the military who was really developing the aircraft, and then those guys spun off more for commercial, particularly after World War II. So there's also collaboration. I mean, NASA has hired SpaceX to deliver stuff to the space station and also take trash away. It's a big deal. So that's a wonderful collaboration between the federal resources and private space enterprise. And we're going to see that grow more and more, and that's a healthy, good thing.
Hi. So I'm very interested on the concept that you were saying that like a table on Earth is not a table in space. And I was wondering, like, if we're gonna reinvent our reality in space, how would you use your design to reinvent a society and make sure that all the mistakes that we as a society have made in terms of like poverty and violence do not get extended to that area?
That's probably the most important question, quite frankly. The good news is that we're highly cooperative currently in space. The International Space Station, International, has 16 partners, with the main partners being Russia and the United States. And while we might have issues with Russia, this is one area where we cooperate very well, because the Russian people are proud of their space program. They should be. And we always want to have a cosmonaut around, because they can actually take things apart and fix stuff. But space is a neutral zone. It's dangerous, it's tough, it's hard, it's a challenge. We cannot just as one country afford to do major space projects. We have to team up, and that teaming and working together off-world, I think, will actually increase knowledge and cooperation between countries and stuff. We're starting to cozy up a little bit more to China on their space program, and China's doing very good on their space program. But space is a neutral zone where we can go together. There's no one we have to conquer, and there's opportunities for international cooperation. Okay, well, is there one more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so 5 to 10 years ago, I became aware of the concept of a bucket list. There was a movie, I think, that came out about it, and so far, the only thing on my bucket list is to take a vacation to space. So I was really excited to see that you were into space tourism. Right now, it's available for people who have $150 million to spend. When do you think it will be available to the rest of us?
Well, for normal space tourism, not the moon thing, it's probably about 40 million, so it's a little cheaper.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The truth is a long time, because space is expensive, space is dangerous, but believe me, within the next 20, 25 years, you might be down to, say, $500,000. You might be able to finance it, there will be lotteries, there'll be ways to win, and most important, and here's the big deal, work in space. If you have a space yacht, you have to have people that run the yacht. You have to have people who build the yacht. Okay, cook the meals, right? So there are careers in space that are going to grow and diversify that you can be involved with, and that's your ticket to go, and to go a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, are we done? Okay. Thank you.